the takeover of an American city, the easiest one to take over for the federal government, of course, to Washington, D.C., already administered by the federal government on some level, and the plan and strategy already hinted at by the president yesterday to take over other American cities and clean them up, civilize the democratic cities, the same way the civilized nature of Los Angeles was to have been brought about by the presence of National Guard and Marine troops. There, at least you had protests of some kind, and there looked to be some kind of threat to federal buildings. And after all, the National Guard can only really be charged with protecting those federal buildings, right? And the same is true of the Marines, even more so in the case of the Marines. But point being, here you have this weird area where Trump makes these declarations and talks about a city run amok. It was very Trump first campaign rhetoric stuff from Trump yesterday at the press conference. Of course, he was all over the road with everything and totally made up statistics for the most part. However, the idea somehow that, Washington, D.C. is this cauldron of violence and depravity, and I'm here to civilize you. That was and is very much a Trump rhetoric talking point, okay? Rhetorical talking point. And so you end up with other cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Detroit. These are all cities that could be subjected to the same. And you can fill in any blank for any city. Mm-hmm. But the idea somehow that you could paint a picture of, again, this city that is foundering as it's trying to make its way through all of this nastiness every day, that, again, is a picture of America that Donald Trump painted, you'll remember, as he ramped up to winning his first term when he beat Hillary Clinton. That was it. Everything's awful. I'm here to change it and to clean it up. So we'll get into some of the specifics and how ridiculous it is, but it's also alarming, of course. It's immensely alarming and concerning. And
they're freaking out in Chicago because yesterday Trump singled out Chicago and said, we might send the National Guard there next.
Sure. I mean, Chicago's a perfect place to pursue this same dance. Now, the dance is performative, right? We all understand that. This is theater. This is a show. It's all a show. Now, there are aspects of it. It's underpinned by some really dangerous, scary stuff. And that is, of course, the authoritarianism that is growing and the despotism that is clearly being enabled by the GOP just checking out, letting this guy do whatever he wants. So under flimsy invocation of some law, he's able to do this or that. He's able to, in the case of Washington, D.C., take over the city for 30 days. He'll find another flimsy rationale legally, maybe not even a defensible rationale, but he'll do it. And then, we've talked about this before on the show. This is the Trump way. He does it, and then you can sue about it. But by the time the lawsuit gets done, I've already done it. If I'm Donald Trump, I'm going, hey, I don't care. I've been there for 30 days. I've been there for 2 months. I did it. I did the tariffs. I did whatever I wanted to do. Go ahead and take me to court. By the time the court case rolls around, I made my point. He's very gangster in the way he runs everything. It's very mob bossy. And he has, as his hench people around him, some pretty nasty characters who are, ready to bust heads on his behalf. And you've got Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, you saw him, Hegseth. These are all true believers, and they know the dance too. They are fully on board, especially if it's just performative. And it is. You heard Pam Bondi, we're going to stop crime in D.C. It stops today. We're on it. She said these words just like that, forcefully. And that's exactly what Trump wants. Pam Bondi running the Metropolitan Police Department of Washington, D.C.? It's absurd. I mean, Pam Bondi or Kash Patel or any configuration of any of these people running Washington, D.C. law enforcement. That's what we're talking about here. You understand? We're talking about the federal takeover of local law enforcement. So that has to be coordinated, their logistics and all the rest. We told you yesterday, there has been no communication between the feds and the cops. There's been no advanced coordination to make this work. We know these guys can't coordinate their way out of a paper bag. You know what they're really good at? Doing things like building a ballroom at the White House. That's good. Repaving the Rose Garden. That's the stuff that they're good at. Putting gold everywhere at the White House. That's the stuff that Trump is really good at, making it look like a hotel. I got it. But if you're actually talking about administering to American life and making life better, I don't think these guys are good. Look at their immigration policy. Well, they show up at a Home Depot, they arrest a bunch of people, a couple of people are here legally. They go to a high school graduation, they arrest one student who is an honors student and an outstanding athlete, and they put him and his mom in some detention facility to deport them. I think they were deported. I mean, this is the stuff they do. It's not, it's not well thought out. It's a flex always. There's a theatrical, performative flex. And you saw that yesterday in spades. And the real work that has to be done to clean up D.C., to rid the city of crime and all that, that's not going to happen. We know that. But will there be pictures of, Dr. Phil there with the National Guard down there in Washington, D.C., showing everyone how they're clearing the streets of some of the vermin that have taken over Washington? Probably. There'll be a lot of local news cameras, right? I won't literally be Dr. Phil, but you know what I'm saying. It's the Dr. Phil media moment when he was with the immigration officers. They're gonna advertise. That's what they do well. They do the performance well, and then they advertise policy well. That's what Kristi Noem does. Half the time she's shooting videos and commercials for getting rid of immigrants. And I have to say this, if you live in a major city, you may really feel like, Mark, I've always considered myself kind of a lib, but it's getting crazy, and we got to have more of a police presence. I get it. I have no problem with police presence. The police officers at least are trained in to handle so many of the challenges you have in patrolling an urban area. The National Guard isn't. And there is no plan. That's why I mentioned the logistics to actually do anything here. So
I'm thinking about what you're talking about as far as law enforcement and people being frustrated that there's not enough police in their city to handle it. If we don't have enough police officers, and we saw during the pandemic that we had a shortage of police, then why would the Trump administration want to lure away officers to become part of ICE and go to all of our communities and try to take officers that we need to do the real work of policing to then do their, be party to their agenda to try to take people, go to Home Depot and take people away? Like, what do we really need? Do we really need that, or do we really need police in our community?
Yeah, I mean, I think that already suggests far more reflection and contemplation on a strategy moving forward than you'll ever see from this administration. They are full speed ahead. You saw the amount of money that's going into ICE and DHS. It's a sick amount of money. It's about I want to say it's like $120 billion. That's how much money is going into Kristi Noem's pockets there at DHS. Now, there's a breakout. 45 billion, I believe it's either 45 or 46, is going to ICE. And then there's a big chunk that goes to building those detention centers, and maybe it's about 19 billion. You have to, with these numbers, you'll have to, I'm doing it from memory, and I've been up for days. I've been up for days with my poor cat in surgery and stuff. So
Oh,
I'm not remembering super clearly, but I guess what I'm trying to tell you is a supercharged budget at DHS.
yeah,
They just want to staff DHS, and there's none of the thinking about, you know, hobbling other agencies that already are short of
right.
officers along the lines of what you're talking about.
And what
Yeah.
happens when that money runs out? Then, you have all these new ICE officers, and what happens to them? Do they just get cut? Doge cuts coming in when we've deported all the people and there's not the work is done? Then what?
I mean, it's going to be it's going to be hard to run out of that money. But if anybody
Mhm.
can run out of that money, it's this crew. So you're right. I agree. West Theory, $5 super chat says, "Does DC have the facilities to house or jail all the people they plan on arresting or relocating?" Again, that you really are thinking like someone who is trying to organizationally apply a logistical strategy to something that is underpinned by none of that. This is performative. It's theater. It's get these 800 National Guardsmen on the streets and tell everybody how you're cleaning up DC, make a couple of high-profile arrests, and then tell everybody at the end of 30 days, look how I've cleaned up DC. It's a bigger job than even I would have imagined. Many are saying it couldn't have been done at all. But look, we did a lot in 30 days, and that's why I want Congress to extend my control over Washington, D.C., which Congress can do to beyond that 30-day period. So when you talk about, is there room to house? Look what they did when they brought the Marines to Los Angeles. There was no place to put them, and they didn't even know how to feed them. It was horrible. Plus, these guys had nothing to do. They sat around. They were bored. The National Guard and the Marines and the military is increasingly under this administration used as props. They are theatrical props. That's what I am insanely offended by. These people really signed up to defend the nation, to go off to theaters of conflict, and instead, in Trump 1, they sent them to the southern border to defend against the caravan coming up from Latin America. Do you remember that? It was at Christmas time. I said, I can't believe this. You're going to take Christmas away from these troops, send them to a southern border to defend against a caravan that you've ginned up and propagandized with Fox News Channel to sound like it's some kind of real threat. It's a bunch of guys in torn jeans and T-shirts who are starving and thirsty. Yet the Marines, in that case, I think it was the Army, in any case, the military moved to the southern border as a prop. And in this case, I'd suggest the National Guard is mostly in the theatricality of it all. It's performative. Yeah, they'll be there. They'll be there with loaded weapons, all of that. But what are they going to do? I mean, again, I want to make this clear. If you live in a major city, you may say, I don't care what they do. Just having them there makes it less likely that there'll be a smash and grab with my car. I mean, there is an argument in San Francisco that with all the smash and grabs, with crime in certain areas, even tourist areas being so such an impediment to people visiting, such a concern, that we need to do something. We need more cops. I always feel like flood that zone with cops. That's what they did in New York City. And of course, there's a shortage of police officers, as Kim has mentioned. But the National Guard is, they're not empowered to do much. And I just feel as though it's more of a flex than anything else. And it sets the table for the federal takeover, the Trumpian takeover of these cities. Chicago, LA, and San Francisco, honestly, could very much be on that list because that's a Democratic city as well. What's that, Kim?
Oh, my husband was a U.S. Marine, and I was talking to him about how it would have been if he had been deployed to like Los Angeles or something, and how would he have felt about that? And he said, well, when I was in, which is, a while back, he said, we were not trained to control crowds or deal really with civilians. We're trained to kill people. And he went on in a gory way to explain to me all the ways in which he was trained to break people's necks. And I said, "Oh, that's fantastic. Wonderful." He goes, "Well, that's what the Marines are for."
This puts in context a little bit of one person's opinion about DC. Okay. So, again, what happened in DC is Musk's guy, Big Balls, was roughed up in a car jacking attempt. And by the way, I don't mean to diminish how intense that is. That's probably really intense. But based on that, Trump was able to pivot to this takeover of Washington. And here was a little bit of the reaction from another Washingtonian who was talking about, yeah, that's a pretty alarming picture. Look, Washington, as I said, was always, beset by violent crime. I'll remind everybody, the NBA team there had to change their name. They used to be the Washington Bullets. There were so many murders at gunpoint that they felt that was tone deaf to continue with an NBA team called the Washington Bullets. They called Washington the murder capital of the world. So they changed the name to the Washington Wizards. That's not the Washington that's there now. It's gotten better. But if you talk to a lot of Washingtonians, there'll be, I'm sure, opinion like, hey, it's still bad. The term Washington Bullet refers to the Washington Wizards basketball team when they were previously known as the Washington Bullets. Exactly. The name changed in 1997 because of the violent connotations of the word bullets. So they became the Washington Wizards. Anyway, this is one guy's opinion as to the way Washington is now. And again, it's just one opinion, but when it comes to evaluating the safety of Washington, the kind of place it is, you'll get opinions like this one.
I mean, I have lived in the Washington metropolitan area for my entire life, almost 50 years now. I've lived in the city for 20 years. The most violent moment in my life in Washington, D.C., the greatest cause of a threat, not only physical threat, but bigger threat to the country and certainly to law enforcement officers, was January 6, 2021, when Donald Trump's supporters, his allies, some people who currently work for him, charged into the Capitol, beat cops, screamed profanities at them, yelled, "Kill the cops," said they wanted to hang the vice president of the United States. And Donald Trump's response to that, here in the nation's capital, at the Capitol building, was to pardon everyone who was involved and in some cases rehire them into his government. So watching this play out in the White House briefing room without any mention of the violent crime that was committed on his behalf in Washington, D.C. is a little unusual. I do want to say one thing.
I think I can understand why he didn't mention the violent crime committed on his behalf, with all due respect. That's just sort of like inappropriate. But, yeah, of course, it's a huge blind spot for anything along the lines of what he's talking about. I mean, he's talking about what is the apex moment of violence in Washington, when thousands took over the Capitol and Donald Trump couldn't find the phone number for the National Guard, couldn't find the phone number for any protective forces to come in and try to push back those demonstrators and violent coosters. They were really attempting a coup.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, he pardons everyone involved in that. So there is a lot in Donald Trump world that's all about Donald Trump, right? I'd say everything's about Donald Trump. So in this case, as I've mentioned before, it's both performative, it's theatrical. You'll see these National Guard troops, 800 of them, take to the streets of Washington, D.C. But apart from that, I don't know that you're going to see any change in any crime statistics. I guess they can move homeless people out. Yeah, here's a little bit of what's happening in Washington right now. You can see the National Guard is arriving. And again, this is what Donald Trump wants. And this is the administration that really plays on imagery. It plays on the theater. And so these are the National Guard troops arriving, and Kim was asking some questions earlier about, like, how are we, where are they going to be housed? What are they going to do? These are things that really probably haven't been thought through. I mean, you've got Pam Bondi in charge of the Metropolitan Police Department. This has no kind of logistical underpinning. There are no blueprints in place. I can say this because we know the Washington, D.C. Police Department hadn't been contacted by the Trump administration in any way. No public official contacted to work out ahead of time what this might look like. So the idea that she's going to take over the police department with some sort of, I don't know, uh, I get it. She's got a mandate, but she doesn't have a strategy. It's all feeling like theater. And so even yesterday's uh, photo op was just that. Pete Hegseth, Kash Patel, we're going to play the hits. Democratic cities, they don't know how to run them. I'm going to come in. I'm going to clean them up. And were there a plan, we at least could evaluate that. This isn't that. It is just, it's performance. And again, these National Guard men and women who serve nobly, they are being used as props. And that's offensive,
And just like in Los Angeles, when Governor Gavin Newsom said, we don't need help, and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass said, we don't need help. The mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser, is saying violent crime in the district decreased by 26% over the last year. That according to Metropolitan Police Department stats. Though crime overall, they said, has only gone down by 7% during that same period. They said the city was able to reverse a crime spike that happened in 2023. This year, Bowser said crime isn't just down from 2023, it's also down from 2019 before the pandemic, and we're at a 30-year violent crime low. But she said, we're not satisfied. We haven't taken our foot off the gas. We continue to look for ways to make our city safer. But if you're talking about crime in DC being at its worst, the officials in Washington, DC say, no, it isn't at its worst, as a matter of fact, not at all.
It's also, it's worth noting, LA and DC, both women mayors. I think there is, and I'm seeing a little bit of this, that's why I'll just comment on it. There's a quality of distraction, I understand, to this big flex. It's a huge move. It may set the table for additional moves like it. We talked about it, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, et cetera. I mean, he can move into these cities with the flimsy or even indefensible legal rationale that is then rolled back. But once he's moved in, he's made the flex, And I'd say, of course, that's a distraction from Epstein. I understand that. I mean, it's too big a story. But I don't know if it's the reason for the action. And I'd suggest to you that for all the reasons we've mentioned and more, the slow takeover of local municipalities and major cities by the federal government, that's a big story on its own. Sure, it might be a distraction too, but I'd say that this is a big moment. This is a road test, it's fair to say, for the continuing efforts to take over American cities and municipalities with troops who are pledged in loyalty to their commander. And those commanders, as you go up the line, have loyalty to Donald Trump. There is a lot to be concerned about here. And so as we lose democracy in some ways, the redrawing of districts that are already so intensely drawn in GOP favor in Texas, in Florida, in other red states, it's worth noting that the other thing that's happening concurrently is this takeover of American cities. LA under the guise of, but you'll remember, it was under the guise of restoring order because there were so many protests, but I'll remind you, you'll remember the remarks of Kristi Noem. We're here to liberate this democratic city. Or this Democrat city is probably what she said. But the city, we're here to liberate you from the democratic policies, the flawed policies. So all of this is happening, and I'd suggest it's all part of a plan. Project 2025 laid out a bunch of this, the dismantling of government, and then the takeover of democracy in this way. The ends justify the means. Let's get this country back to being the Christian nation that it should be, with a more traditional arrangement domestically, where men are men and women are women, and women are in the kitchen pregnant, and men are out there in the workforce. I mean, this is a truly bizarre, and it would seem indefensible notion of what this culture should be. We would have seemed to have evolved past this 1950s sort of outlook. I mean, it might even predate that. But this is what this crew is doing. It's going to be something of a time machine that way. Tony, what else do I have? I have the setup piece on what's happening in Washington. Yeah, let's take a look. This is, I think it's a good summary of what's happening, and then we will move on. But here you go.
President Trump is calling up the National Guard in the nation's capital, saying it's needed to crack down on crime there.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse.
President Trump, who's been critical of D.C.'s crime rate for years, temporarily taking control of the D.C. police after a former government staffer who used to work for Elon Musk was attacked in an attempted carjacking, according to authorities. The president calling it Liberation Day in D.C.
We're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back. Under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States, I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. You know what that is?
No.
And placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control.
Sources say officials from the Secret Service, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and U.S. Park Police have been dispatched to the district, along with 120 FBI agents. The president also suggesting trying teenagers as young as 14 as adults. Despite the president's claims about violence in D.C., the city's police data shows crime in the nation's capital is down 7% since last year, and violent crime in D.C. hit a 30-year low in January.
If the priority is to show force in an American city, we know he can do that here. But it won't be because there's a spike in crime.
But NBC4 in Washington reported last month a D.C. police commander is under investigation for allegedly making changes to crime statistics in his district. The police union says supervisors in the police department manipulate crime data to make it appear violent crime is falling considerably compared to previous years. CBN White House correspondent Kelly Wright says in addition to his move against crime, the president is also focusing on cleaning up the city.
He told reporters that his administration is removing homeless people from under bridges and public spaces like public parks throughout the city. He says his efforts are to make D.C. safe again and beautiful again.
And Trump's efforts to crack down on crime will apparently not end in D.C. The president saying his efforts will go to other cities, including New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Baltimore.
Great.
Wendy Griffith,
I'm
CBN
excited
News.
for the same chaotic craziness to be imposed upon those major cities. That's Christian Broadcasting Network, I believe. And so you got, I sometimes like to show you stuff that's not like MSNBC or whatever, just to give you a sense of the fact that there's controversy about this within the city of Washington. But I'll remind you, the city of Washington is overwhelmingly democratic, however you have to say it now, so it's not a slur. But it's an anti-Trump city. By no area voted against Trump more than the Washington, D.C. area. Okay, so he views them as the enemy to begin with. But more to the point, he's road testing at this point. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.